So Andy, what is an AI innovation team?
So for me, it's really a kind of specialist part of the organization that really kind of straddles the difference between business background. They know how the businesses work within the bank, and really that technical know-how. So they're at the forefront. They know the vendors, they know the kind of the tech snacks, and they have access to that talent to be able to start building things.
Yeah. So if you were joining a new organization, say tomorrow,
Yep.
and there's infrastructure in place, lots of tech, lots of data,
Yeah.
let's say, imagine it's comprehensive and mature,
Yeah.
how would you design a brand new AI innovation team or office?
Yeah. So really, I really love the concept. It goes back to Dale Carnegie of a brain trust. So what you need to have is representatives of all part of the business. So starting literally from the C-suite, you need to have the heads of the business, the sponsors of the business, and then you need to have specialist areas of those businesses to be that key AI person, the one that's going to represent that business and their part of it in a kind of a collective. That is your start of your committee, and that's going to start to form the basis for the governance. It's going to start forming the decision-making process, and most importantly, the direction of travel as you're going to go through that innovation process.
Yeah. I keep seeing them pop up, heads of AI, chief AI
Yes,
officers.
yes,
Half the time I don't know what they mean or what the company's
yes,
looking for.
yeah,
But I think the reality is more companies want someone who can look after the AI strategy.
yes,
Whether they're actually doing AI is probably a separate question.
yeah.
But from what you've seen over the last few months in terms of this head of AI figure,
Yeah.
what kind of skills does this person need? Or is it just a glorified head of data or head of technology?
Yeah, it's a great question because there's a number of components to that. There is an AI development component, which is this innovation component. So how do you take this brand new capability, especially generative AI, how do you turn it into something that's going to add margin to the bottom line? Then you have essentially data teams, which is fundamentally important. It's the fuel. It's what source brings everything together within that basis for AI. But data, particularly within banks, has been this very regulated, very kind of very special part of the bank that is separate from innovation. And so what you've got is really a new kind of era where these two areas are starting to come together. Data pipelines were never a thing a few years ago, and slowly what you've seen is the explosion of generative AI, the new LLMs that keep coming out every week. Really, they need a source, and especially within organizations, they need a very, very crisp, clean set of data to start with.
Yeah. And so generally within banks, what are they looking for generative AI to do for them? Is it more so to help the existing technology setup, or is
Yeah.
it to improve products? What are they thinking?
Yeah, it's a bit of everything. I mean, I break it into really kind of four key areas. The first one is productivity. Everyone wants to have, they want to shave that 10% margin off, costs and expenses, general productivity that you can have. And this can be very simple from the bringing in, for example, Copilot, meeting summarizations, very general productivity that really kind of brings overall efficiency with the organization. The second part to it is really starting to look at manual processes within the bank. Huge organizations, they have a lot of these types of processes. How do you replace them? The third part is what I call upgrading. So chatbots are a classic example. So everyone here has probably had a rule-based chatbot, that's something that comes up and it's like, please can you, what would you like me to do today? Please can you do this? Sorry, I don't understand, right? And so now, that you have this ability with generative AI in general to kind of create that next version of these chatbots. So powered, they understand, the natural language processing capabilities, really upgrading existing technology. And then the fourth area is what I call kind of the custom brewery example. So this is where you start bringing really specialized, brand new applications targeted on specific teams, specific areas, and this could be sales, for example, this could be operations, and this is where you would actually build this from scratch. So this is bringing in a custom LLM, a vector database, your coding, your logic, whether it's retrieval, augmented generation, whatever you need to do to solve a particular problem and create a new product for the bank.
Yeah. And I know your background's basically all financial services,
Yes.
FinTech. technological innovation. So, can you provide an overview of your career so far? Set the scene.
Yeah, I mean, I started really in Canary Wharf actually in 1999, which is brilliant. And I joined Barcap on the debt capital markets side. I moved to JP Morgan, was there for 13 years in bank and in Canary Wharf. And for me, that was looking at everything from securitization to private equity to working in credit trading. And after that area, I really wanted to explore on the technical side. So had the opportunity to work in Level 39. It's where Revolut started, where Ripple started, and really kind of got into where it was like the digital asset side, where there was a huge amount of innovation and building things with CEOs and innovators. And then, 2019 had an opportunity to move to New York. So changed countries, changed jobs, and had a baby girl at the same time in New York. So worked in digital asset teams in New York for tier one banks. And then had the opportunity really over the last couple of years to get into generative AI. And I haven't looked back since. It's been an incredible journey.
Yeah. And in terms of digital assets,
Yeah.
I know there was a massive hype cycle a few years ago, crypto, blockchain. I feel like it's picking up again.
Yes.
So, what are digital assets?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. It's a bit like kind of like what is AI? So digital assets is anything that you can be represented digitally. So a lot of different types of products. So for example, stable coins is a big thing, which is a digital representation of money. There's various different translations of that. There's e-money, there's digital money, there's tokenized assets. So what you have is, think of it as digital assets as a digital representation of something, and it could be a cash, it could be an asset, it could be a contract, it could be various different, it could be even a service as well. So you have utility coins, you have lots of different options, but think of it as that kind of digital representation that you can do things with. You can program it, you can use it to build new products, you can be part of ecosystems, and you can spend it, burn it. Incredibly flexible and a real kind of foundation for for building future products.
Yeah. But why would any organization actually invest in digital assets? What can it actually solve?
So, okay, fantastic real use scenario. So think about cash settlement today, right? In America, generally you have, whether if you want to sell some shares, you have what, typically you'll have T+2 settlement, right? There was a huge move within the industry to move to T+1 settlement. Some regulatory requirements came along. All the banks were like taking the systems, cranking them a little bit faster, and to increase that from T+2 to T+1. Really, digital assets is like the next stage of evolution. The whole development of things like the crypto industry enabled things like 24/7 trading. It enabled, instantaneous settlement, T+0. And digital assets, is one of the core technologies that you're going to have that's going to allow people to get to T+0. So a great example was last month, Swift announced that they're going to have a blockchain ledger, as part of a lot of the standardization of general money flows. You have this ISO 20022 rule, which again creates metadata and standardized data within cash payments, and it really creates this layer now where people can create a 24/7 T+0. If I want to send you cash, or from this, say you're in India, okay, instead of going through cross-border settlement, maybe it could be quick, but sometimes it could take anything between a day and a week or 2 weeks, depending on the number of counterparties between. You have a technology now where you both have digital ledgers. I send the money, you have T+0, same day settlement. It's done.
All right, okay. That's interesting.
So that's just one. That's just breaking the kind of the surface. Again, digital representations, communities, tokens, different. There was a great thing at the blockchain conference this week. VE Chain has a VE Beta, kind of coin that comes out for when you have a user coffee, you have a user reusable cup. You take a picture of your cup and you get rewarded for it. Right.
Okay.
So again, helping the environment. It's not just at this kind of the stage of the kind of the corporate level. It's across communities, and it's across different types of markets as well.
Yeah, and everyone said crypto was dead in 2022. They said it at the start of this year as well.
Yes.
For the fifth, sixth time. So what do people generally misunderstand about digital assets?
Yeah. So there's confusion in terms of what it is, first of all. And it's very understandable because there's different types. So you can have certain things like Bitcoin, cryptocurrency. That's one type. Ethereum, all of the coins that you have out there are types of one type of digital asset. You have things like stable coins. Stable coins is where you actually have essentially a digital representation of a dollar, right? So that dollar could be used in the same way that you'd be able to spend it, for buying a coffee or any other types of goods, but again in a digital form. And then you start having things like utility coins. You have NFTs that came out, non-fungible tokens, so digital artwork representation. So people could buy a piece of a Picasso if they really wanted to, So there's various different types, and within, especially for financial services, a lot of the focus has really been on what's in it for me, how do you get past the hype, what are my clients asking me for? And a lot of the time now, stable coins, you mentioned it's like, say crypto is dead. In the US, you had the passing of the Genius Act this year, an act, specifically focused on stable coins that's been in development for many, many years. And it sets that legislative framework. Think of it as a parallel to the MiCA Act within Europe as well. But again, focus specifically on those types of payment flows and regulating that as a market. That has led, again, with things like, Stripe's announcement from the bridge, the Swift ledger I mentioned earlier before, Circle's IPO that came out this year based on the back of the Genius Act. Some incredible momentum has suddenly been reinvigorating the market. And obviously when, asset prices come up, the American administration again has changed. A lot of this is now turned from a very positive, friendly aspect. And then probably not forgetting BlackRock announced that, they're in terms of tokenizing their ETFs. So again, creating those digital representations of those, allowing, ironically, people that have been holding Bitcoin to move them legally into an ETF, so they become more of a financial balance sheet rather than this kind of distinct asset class, which has been historically. So to answer your question, it's definitely not dead, but it's changing, and it's becoming more legal, it's becoming more regulated, and also it's becoming more used. And with that utility, increases in price, and also, helps feed that market development.
Yeah, so basically the economics of it is going to make the market more attractive.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You mentioned stable coins as well. You were at the blockchain conference in London. So stable coins, hype versus truth.
Yeah, no. Again, one of the great panel discussions that they had there is, there's some brilliant facts that are out right now. So right now, 99% of stable coins are US dollar denominated, okay? And 80% of those that you have about over 300 billion market cap right now. 80% is to two issuers, is Tether and Circle. And so what you have now is Europe has this huge kind of pressure. It's probably the best way to describe it. It has the regulatory framework. MiCA is not perfect by any means, but it's that first base standard that they have to be able to start creating their own market within these. So now you've got this, the hype versus truth. You have this, everyone loves the Gartner, hype cycle. It's moved from the trough of disillusionment, right? It's definitely now across the other side of that, and it's coming up the other side for the path of enlightenment. And really what you're seeing now is a lot of organizations, now that you have that legislative agenda, in place in the US and in Europe, companies can now invest, they can actually start building those products, and they can then start building, rails that you have that connect them. So European companies, ING's already got a pilot as well. There's a huge amount of stuff that Swift doing with 30 banks, to be able to bring their own version of these, and also things like CBDCs, so central bank digital currencies. Right now you've technically only got, China has had a huge, still in beta testing, but you have the sand dollar, you have something in Jamaica. You've got a few of currencies that are actually being used in real life. But El Salvador moved to Bitcoin a while ago. You're going to have the development of whether it's European central bank digital currencies. Once those rails happen, you're going to have essentially a Euro central bank digital currency. You'll have a US in the future. And then you'll have this new ecosystem that is purely digital.
Right, okay. So it's evolving rapidly. I know there was a mention of AI within stablecoins as well. And that's kind of a worrying sign. Two major technologies combining. Do you have any insights on that talk that you went to?
Yeah, I mean, one of the interesting things is, there's certain things AI does really well, and certain things it doesn't do well, right? Exactly the same arguments made for blockchain. So when blockchain first came out, it was like, oh, this is hype. It's amazing. It's going to solve everything. It's going to, world poverty. It's going to be this fantastic thing. And it's great, but it specializes in certain things. So, immutable source of truth, that ability to have smart contract programmability, it has certain things that it does really well. So the focus you've seen really is things like cross-border settlements, that payments infrastructure, creating that T+0 I mentioned earlier. And then you have this sort of the AI, so that ability to automate things, that having that, that expert in the room with you, being able to take certain types of data, from various different sources, and to generate that new content. And so what was really interesting is now, again, you have really these kind of force multipliers that are coming out in the market where you take both of those capabilities and you put them together. So imagine, there was a great kind of, prediction of saying, 80% of, certain payment flows can be automated by AI, right? By 2030, so what you're taking is taking things that blockchain does incredibly well, and then pairing those things with those, agentic capabilities. So creating little tiny agents or these little specialized products to be able to automate things without, human intervention, which again is a whole topic in itself.
Yeah, okay. And so will blockchain technology actually help the AI revolution in any way?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, right now, what you're seeing is this interesting convergence, So both technologies have been around for a while, right? Go back to 2008 when you had the first, Bitcoin paper coming out. Ethereum launched in 2015. All the debacles, that you've had that have gone through the industry, 2022, 23, and then this kind of resurgence that's coming out now, the same thing's happening with generative AI, So, when Google had their first paper in 2017 on the transformer model, 2020 when, ChatGPT 3 came out, no one really cared about it, right? November 22 was at this pivotal moment, when OpenAI came out with that model, that people started paying attention. When Microsoft launched their first enterprise Copilot in November 23, people were suddenly blown away, and a lot of people that had seen kind of, I think maybe the first time you ever experienced AI, right, in your pocket, whether it's ChatGPT or something else, you think, oh my, this is witchcraft, right? And moving on from that stage, it's like until you start working with the technology, you realize what it actually is, and what it does really well, and what also it doesn't do well as well. So
yeah. I remember when I was at university, a few years ago now, but we didn't have ChatGPT, but we had small language models. There were a couple of apps that I would use and rinse for, literature, paraphrasing, like spelling automation. And a lot of the technology within that is now in ChatGPT. It's just visualized differently.
yeah,
So when I first saw ChatGPT, I remember my manager mentioned it and he said, "Why have you seen this?" I thought, well, it's cool, but it's been around for ages, like 5 or 6 years. But I think for the next wave of revolution, or what's seen as revolution in the tech space, it will just be fancy front ends.
Yeah.
And maybe there is a lot of back-end development innovation happening in the background, but I suppose we'll have to see how that develops over the next few years. But it's an interesting point, and we need to start paying more attention to it and what actually is fresh and innovative.
Yeah, and there was a brilliant point that was made as well, is that, a lot of this technology will become embedded. There was, if you think of your phone, they mentioned it in terms of the stack. If you look at your phone, you have this automatic face recognition software that unlocks the phone, some logic around there. There's a number of capabilities that are already built in. People didn't realize AI or algorithms were working on your Netflix feed, right? Deciding what you should watch or shouldn't watch, or your Instagram feed, or, whatever people have these days is, there's a huge amount of stuff that becomes embedded. You don't realize it's there. And especially within financial services as well, you're going to see a lot more of that. Someone, I think, talked to me a while ago where they're saying, like, every particular search bar will at some point in the future have an AI behind it, right? Now, the question is really do you need that, right? And a lot of the organizations, it's like saying, well, great, I have this hammer, that I'm going to use that's called AI or generative AI, and I'm going to apply it to everything. And so the really interesting part that's happening now is, where do people start deploying their dollars? Where do they deploy their, the investment to actually add value? And one of my colleagues wrote a fantastic article on work slop. Right, I don't know if you're familiar with the term. So Bradley Lemer, I can check it out. For the American Banker, did this little podcast and summarized it brilliantly, which is, in banks where you have this AI output, it has hallucinations, it has this real world inputs, and there's a lot of it, right? And how do you actually stop this? Just because you have a tool that can create unlimited content and create all of these incredible things, do you need to do it? And who's actually going to be the person assessing the quality of it? So there's this AI slop, and now you have the enterprise version of work slop, which I think will, become more and more embedded in things in the future.
All right, okay, that's interesting. Before we get too technical, can we just go back to basics a second?
Of course.
For those who are maybe digitally savvy but aren't really in this world, so what is blockchain technology?
So blockchain technology is, someone described it a long time ago to me, which is great. Think of it as an Excel in the sky, all right? So, so what you have is like people talking about it as a ledger, okay? Where you have is essentially a ability to create imagine your Excel, create something, and then what you'll do is that piece of data is locked in there, okay? So you might want to have a file, right, that has an HR file on someone that you would have. You then have amendments to that file, right? Those amendments are then tracked. The original file is still there, but the amendments will go on another block. That block, goes on. There'll be further amendments. Maybe you'll add another file to it. So what happens is you'll end up having, say, 100 files over time. What you have is this immutability. So any point for an audit trail or a regulator that wants to come in, they can go back and check when that file was created, when it was amended, and be able to actually see that forever. So it's very impossible to tamper with. If you think of it as that chain with each of those different blocks at the end of it, hence the blockchain name, you have this ability to create essentially this ledger. And so when you have things like financial transactions, or if anyone who's ever owned cryptocurrency, when you have that purchase, you're actually updating the ledger, you're updating the blockchain. That is there forever. And the ability to have that for security purposes, to build things on that, and then once you have it there, you can program it. You have these things called smart contracts, where you have ability to, if certain things happen, you can then start adding things to it as well. So it's very, very simple, but I like the Excel in the sky example to start with. It's a nice thing.
That's great. I've seen a few companies in London and the US advertise for smart contract engineers.
Yeah.
Which was interesting. So, firstly, what are they? And then secondly, what other roles are going to be created off the back of blockchain technology in the crypto market? Yeah.
There's a great analogy between, people have heard of prompt engineering as well, right? So what you've got is a capability with blockchain is that's programmability, all right? So how do you create certain programs to do certain things? If you have that, that ledger, You still need to be able to access it. You need to be able to create systems. Though if someone wants to transfer some money from one person to another, there has to be that instruction set around it. And so what you have is this ability where you have these little programs that sit around the layers and interact with the blockchain and be able to actually update, create records, delete files, create coins, burn coins. There's a huge amount of things that can be done. But really what you're asking for that role is then building those to real world applications. So, people talk about, certain things that run autonomously, so whether it's in an exchange, certain instructions come in and then they are automated that they will go through a different program. Same idea where you have agentic frameworks, where you have this little preset algorithms that are set up that will be able to work and interact with other parts of the models as well. So it's again, it's a new science, it's a new area of expertise. With AI as well, people talk about Python, they talk about Cursor, they talk about low code, no code, all of the different things that are coming in. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter about the particular parts. It's the ability of learning those new tools that people are using to create products. And I think one of the most interesting parts of this is blockchain particularly was still more focused on traditional programming skills that you would need, whether it's C hash or any of the different ones that would support some of the underlying blockchains, including the ones that are actually customizable. So R3, for example, has its own language that you'd have to learn, to be able to program it. Compared to AI now, where you're having a lot of these where non-technical users can create applications using that generative power of AI as well, or use the AI to check existing code that has been generated by someone else as well. So we're in a very interesting time at the moment, and those types of those roles are technical, but also really about being able to learn that and really utilize those latest tools to build something meaningful.
Yeah. So if someone was wanting to go into the crypto or blockchain technology market, say as a job, how would they force their way in there? Would they go through traditional software engineering routes, or do they work for a bank?
Yeah, traditionally in a new market, right? A lot of them have been tech-based. So, think of the big tech, backgrounds. A lot of people have come from those types of backgrounds where they're software developers. If you look at a lot of the teams, it's teams of engineers, it's teams of product developers or traditional product developers, working at tech firms, right? Underlying, it's still a technology at the end of the day. These aren't regulated financial institutions. So the skill set that they have is much more technical on the engineering side, the developing side, and that kind of pure programming side that you'd have, whereby you have a lot more people, and then kind of a layer of sales on top of that, right? But with the financial organization, you have things like the compliance, you have a regulatory side, you have a huge amount of additional layers that you have due to those organizations, their status as regulated entities.
Yeah, that makes sense. Are there many general business roles within that market as well? There's a lot of, at the end of the day, a lot of them are looking for things like people with SaaS experience, scaling cloud applications, the underlying products has to come out at the end of the day. A lot of them are kind of retooling products. So I think there's a lot of KYC applications that are coming out there. So I think there was the news last week where OpenAI hired 100 ex-bankers, right? So to start programming things. So I think it's a really interesting intersection right now, because the key thing that's still, in development is that expertise. People want to have a PhD scientist, to be able to help answer those types of questions. They want to have, the tooling, whether it's analyst style, to build those types of products for analysts in financial services. So you're seeing this kind of expertise getting filled from various different areas, whether it's on the scientific side, biology, pure programming, or in the case of the financial services, those entry-level analysts. Yeah, well, that's reassuring to hear. Well, a lot of people at the minute are scared because of AI
Oh,
and all the technologies around
absolutely.
it.
Yeah.
It's genuinely frightening people. You know, is my job going to be made redundant because of AI? But the reality is we have seen a huge surge in fresh new jobs within the AI market itself,
Yeah.
and also wider technology markets. So it is reassuring to see that a lot of the firms in London and wider UK and US are looking to scale again. I don't know what they'll be looking for next year and 2 years' time, because
Yeah.
the market seems to develop a lot quickly, a lot more quickly than you'd expect. But it's a refreshing sign that it's not just hype, and we are moving to what I'd call an AI revolution.
No,
We'll have to see.
absolutely. And it's really hard, when there's a lot of creative industries that were suddenly extinct overnight. And, I been in a number of the kind of sponsorship of FinTech events, right? And it was really interesting where every year, the last couple of years in New York, I would go along and there would be this, who are the top 10 companies that are out there, right? And you'd see the different waves of coming through. And the first time, it was around about 2023, so the generative AI engine was just starting to get going. And I spoke to 4 AI companies, and the feedback was like, yeah, so we're not really sure. We're testing it, but we don't trust it, right, at that time. And they'd spent literally years on that kind of more traditional, still predictive analytics types of AI, that people are more familiar with before generative AI came along, building very solid applications, some very, very kind of innovative content. But then the following year, completely changed. Every company had suddenly bolted on .ai to their title, in terms of where it is. So what you have right now is, you have to kind of work out exactly, what it is you're trying to do and whether or not AI actually adds value to it as well, So a cautionary tale, is a lot of organizations, and this is something for everyone to take away, have a huge amount of vendors that they're already, have long-term contracts with, and as these vendors go through their own evolution as well, they start incorporating AI into their organization, and that goes into their products. And what happens is a lot of organizations, especially large banking organizations and enterprises, they suddenly have got AI capability that's been added kind of without them asking. So whether you have certain parts where they maybe use image recognition software, they would suddenly go, oh, the version 4.5 now that you have with your enterprise contract now has AI. And I had one vendor that was, it was really interesting. It was at an exhibition, and I'm not going to mention the name, but they said, we've added AI to it. I said, fantastic, great, can you show me? And then they clicked, and there was a tab in their product, and it was a direct portal to the OpenAI. They just literally just put an API in there. And I was like, so you have regulated kind of institutions as part of them. So are you training them in this, or, are you making them aware of it? No, we're just a tech company, right? It's up to them to understand where it is, And for me, I was just like, oh God, people, they want to use the technology, but they need to use it in a safe way. Things like PII, making sure that, any of that confidential bank information that you have at that enterprise level remains confident. Your client's information is confident. It's great, but people need to understand what they have already. It's not about the next new thing, it's understanding what you have today and making sure that even whether there's an assessment of your current AI, you might have 20-30% AI capability you have no idea even existed.
Yeah. So what should companies be wary of when they're speaking to AI vendors?
So the most important thing is what does it do? What are you actually trying to do, and what did it do before? So if you have a company that's suddenly adding an AI capability, what exactly does that mean? And understand it actually at a very intrinsic detail. So people say, oh, it recognizes text. Okay, fine. It's there's lots of things that can do that. So, what's your MVP? What is that thing that makes you special than anything else? And The other thing as well is that they need to understand, do they have that capability in other products as well? There's a great example where, there was a huge amount of work done on language translation. I worked with a team on, and they spent like kind of 6 months, bringing this capability. And, translation, within generative AI is actually very good. I have a very good experience with it. And taking that, that ability, suddenly translating it to Spanish or Portuguese or, Mandarin, it's phenomenal, right? And accuracy as well. It's very, very good. But all of a sudden, they got to that kind of beta stage testing with a brand new model. And then all of a sudden, you had one of the big vendors suddenly dropped it into their application straight away, right? And it was then available. So what you need to be asking is also, I don't need to be paying twice for certain things. I need to understand what capabilities I need. I need to understand what stack I have, and if you're in, most, large organizations today will either have an Amazon, Microsoft or Google, as kind of their core base, Even within those stacks themselves, there's a huge amount that people have without even understanding it. So before people go shopping, for the latest and greatest, spending that money, doing a deep dive in the capabilities you have today, and even just bringing them to your workforce, is going to be money saved,
Yeah. Have you seen any other practical use cases of AI?
Yeah, I mean, it's I think the fundamental one that it does really well, which is kind of like a base case for a lot of organizations, is where you create what's like kind of known as a simple RAG system. So retrieval augmented generation. Just think of it as where you can actually, you have a really nice, clever LLM model, but you have a particular area of your organization that has some specialized information for your team. So let's say you have a sales team, okay? And again, that sales team has a huge amount of proprietary information on their clients. That's not public knowledge. They don't want to be sharing that with any models. They don't want to be, that's kind of their secret source that they have. You can use AI to, create specialized vector database for that, which is, just think of it as just a really specialized knowledge base that large language models love. Create that, and then you can use some of your the big models, whether it's Claude, any of the ChatGPT models, whatever it is, to access that and then give that to your sales force. So, help me prepare, my client based on those previous conversations. Using those prompting boxes, you can add value for that. But you need to get your ducks in a row first, because suddenly bringing in a large language model and then throwing it, proprietary information, not a good path to go down, So doing that in a very structured manner, huge amount of, works at the sales level, a lot of operational work as well. Can be simplified in really kind of operationalized as well. So where you have a lot of those kind of back offices within places that are having information sets, people save a lot of stuff on things like SharePoints, unstructured data, creating processes around that. You can actually really, not only kind of reduce that operational risk, but you can kind of superpower those organizations where it actually becomes possible to build new things on those areas as well.
Yeah, I know there are a lot of technology companies at the minute trying to build these capabilities. A few have already done it. There's a business called Nexus Frontier Tech. They're in London as well, but I told you about them a few weeks ago, actually.
Yeah.
And they have a big setup in Asia and also in the US. And they are basically solving a lot of problems and using AI and the technology to solve them. Whereas a lot of companies right now are looking at the technologies and thinking, how can we put this in? Where should we put this in?
Yes.
And kind of scrambling. So it's interesting you mentioned that. Sometimes it's okay to start with the business problem and find out how to build the solution. And it might not be AI. It could just be general technologies.
You've nailed
That's the
it.
point.
Absolutely. And the amount of people I've come across that are doing exactly what you said, they have it's the hammer, right? I have this really shiny hammer now, and I want to find something to hit with it. Starting with the problem, right? We talked about blockchain earlier as well, and if it's a certain type of technology, that works really well, right? And the answer most of the time, I'll give you a great example, right? I had a team that came across a while ago and they said, I need AI. I was like, great. What do you need AI for? Well, I do this, huge amount of sampling, and I was like, okay, great. How long does it take? Whatever else. It's like, 2 weeks. 2 weeks to figure out the methodology for this. I was like, okay, great, all right. And then what happens? It's like, well, we've got that. Then we actually go through the process, but it's very manual. We have to do this, and it takes another 4 weeks for this, right? And then you can see where you start looking at ROI. There's some real changes here. And I was like, okay, great. So what do you use? Oh, it's just a spreadsheet. I was like, so do you have any specialized tools? Anything? No, it's just a spreadsheet. You don't need AI, right? You don't need this huge hammer to do it. And bringing in specialized statistical software that you have that's already been battle tested in the market, is really where you talk about, things like, chief AI officers, those roles, those are the roles that should be deploying not only the AI technology, but the right technology for the right problem. And a lot of the stuff, the stacks you see from Amazon and Google and Microsoft now are huge. They embed everything from the vector databases to the statistical software to the data science tools that people need. They are there, but they're very complex, and organizations are still constantly, as you're saying, trying to find the technology to fit it in rather than the problem to fit it in. And even in the case with that, statistical problem, giving that person suddenly cuts down a 6-week process to 2 days, right? With the right tools, right? And the tools are not AI, right? Yeah. And that's the interesting part here is that, but you need to have that expertise, and not only the expertise, but the person that has that ability at the firm to get these products through. Better than anyone is that enterprises have processes, they have specific software vendors they're tied to, but also there's, you have, committees to bring in new products as well. And this level of change management that needs to happen takes time, but at the same time, every day that person is still doing that manual process that takes 6 weeks to do it, whereby the spend and the effort people could be doing to give them that person the right tool, could save them, the firm already a huge amount of money for using what they have already.
Yeah, I'm going to contradict myself now. We mentioned you don't need to use the technologies, but I know there are a few that have come out recently. You mentioned Sora to me.
Yes. Absolutely.
Are there any technologies you've been researching or paying attention to?
I mean, what's really interesting right now is I thought quantum was way off, right? And it was 2 years back, I went to a talk on quantum technology where it applies to banking, and I was like, oh, it's here, right? It's here now. And you'll see, from your perspective as well, you'll see people are starting to look at roles within quantum. Okay, for me, it's fascinating, right? We could be having this conversation in a year's time or 2 years' time, and this will be the only, the thing people will be talking about, right? So, what we need to be aware is you want to have that Horizon 3 look, so that's not just a year ahead, 5 years ahead. What's that going to look like? And, there was a great piece in Wired magazine a while ago where they did an experiment where they had a satellite, and they used the quantum technology to decode a signal, from the satellite to spot a tank on a particular area, right? And so when you start looking at that, you see all of the, for example, the cryptographic codes that are now looking at, suddenly quantum technology is going to change all that, and they need to rethink it. Quantum proofing is going to be, it wasn't a term we had a couple of years ago, it's going to be there. So answer your question, I love AI, and I see AI, new stuff coming out every day. I think agentic AI is something I've been following very, very closely. In the near term, that for me is the the natural evolution of AI. And just to be clear for everyone, is like, when people start taking smaller models that does one thing well, you create this agentic AI framework. You can create these little models that do little things very, very well. And then you can actually start stringing them together. So it could be one thing that just reads certain emails, another thing that makes a decision based on those emails, and then another little kind of application that files it in a particular part. Super simple, but people will be able to actually start dragging and dropping these, imagine sitting at your desktop and you have, I don't know, your own little army of models working for you, doing your little things on a daily basis. Again, it's a natural evolution, but people are still working on those kind of core premises. So long story short, I think, there's some future state stuff that is already here, like quantum, I think is going to be very, very interesting. But on the AI side, I think like the agentic framework is going to be dominating the conversation, especially over the coming year.
Yeah. So how else can people use AI agents?
So really, one of the best things I saw was you have, a very simple framework where, you have something you do every day, right? And it could be a very simple process of making an appointment for a client or preparing for a travel trip, right? You want to be able to, look for different flights. You want to book a hotel. You want to book taxis from the airport, from the hotel. You want to book availability at different sites for meeting rooms in a particular area. All of that could be potentially automated, right? And, you saw recently where, OpenAI have been trying to integrate, things like Uber into your own browser, where the AI would actually then start using your accounts to order stuff, whether it's for food takeaway or for a taxi. What you think about it is that little process that you have that could be done well. So if you want to get the best flights to New York, you can have an agent running in the background that you could actually do to look at that. At an enterprise level, that could be things like regulatory reporting, where you actually have a huge amount of different information looking at compliance. So, a lot of financial institutions have a huge amount of different regulators. Each of those regulators come out with different announcements, different different rulings, and how do they apply to the policies. You can have agents that will collect those on a daily basis, summarize them, and then they can actually have another agent that would actually interpret those regulations, then work out what the implications are for the bank that would be.
Yeah, it's interesting though. We're building these AI agents to do our hard work, basically, but it could also do some easy work. I know one of the use cases I discussed a few days ago was on buying cryptocurrency using the agents. Could you program them to buy it, I don't know, when a price drops significantly, and it's a good entry. Obviously, that technology's been there a while.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. I mean, how will all these agents that are, say, mine and yours and everyone else's collide in the future in, areas like cryptocurrency? Because surely everyone's going to be buying at the exact same time.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a great kind of thing where in finance, where you have the efficient market hypothesis, right? Where, if someone has an advantage in a particular market, at some point, everyone will realize that advantage, and that advantage becomes eliminated, right? So I think there'll always be that constant search, for the latest and greatest. Hedge funds have been using algorithms for a long time, right? Algorithmic trading's been around a huge amount. Do you remember dark pools, right? So there's a huge amount of stuff that's been going on and still will continue to go on. I think for the public, I think what's going to happen is, the way that we interact with AI will change, and everyone has on their phone right now, applications. Those applications can be then agents in the future as well. And what we'll have is that, a bit like the Netflix algorithm that works in the background, a lot of this stuff will blend into our everyday. So, you and I, are kind of talk about a lot of the technical aspects of this, but for your average, for your mother to try and use something to go, all she might be interested in is trying to get the latest coupon, or discount on the shopping, right? Now, unknown to her, there might actually be an algorithm behind it, or you know, a particular, in the future, an agent that might be working for her as well that she might have called Coupon Clipper, right? You know, so we're going to see these like different versions of these types of software and these types of things across the retail, you know, the things like the trading level, you know, you mentioned, you know, whether you have retail trading, whether it's for crypto or whether it's for shares or anything else, like meme stock trading is still a huge thing, right? There'll always be these trends that are happening in the market, but you know, you'll have them embedded into these types of software that will be literally sitting on your phone.
Yeah. In terms of cryptocurrency, what is actually the application? Like, what's the use case of crypto? Because I have crypto, and I've just remembered, but I haven't actually done anything with it.
Yeah.
So is there a proper use case for cryptocurrencies at this stage?
Yeah, and look, you have to break down the types of cryptocurrencies and what they are, right? So, you know, if everyone starts with Bitcoin, right, you know, it's been described as digital gold, right? It's this store of value, right? That's kind of one of the core things as well. Then you have the utility, you know, right? So what does it enable me to do, right? So, you know, is it actually representation of ownership, right? So NFTs at some point, you know, before, you know, the market disappeared and now kind of come back, is, you know, was actually representing ownership in a particular thing. Is it a utility? Does owning a particular token give me access to a suite of services that I wouldn't normally get? You know, is that token a dollar or a pound that I have in my wallet that I can spend and buy a coffee with, right? So all of those applications are there. You know, some people now, you know, you can get credit cards that are linked to your crypto account, right? So you can just go shopping in Canary Wharf, you know, and you can buy your lunch, you know, with crypto if you really wanted to. A lot of the big rails like MasterCard and Visa, you know, are working with crypto companies as well, you know, to use that as an extension of credit for your credit card. All right. So, you know, you'll have your, you know, your credit card issued by a particular financial institution, but it'll have maybe the Visa or MasterCard, but that's also linked to your crypto account. So if you have, you know, £100 in your crypto account, then, you know, you've got £100 of credit you could use with your credit card. So all of these things are going to come embedded, but it's got to be part of your daily routine and what you actually have.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Do you feel like finance has become entertainment now? Because it's so easy to actually buy, you know, stocks, shares, crypto.
Yeah, I mean, look, the whole like GameStop saga and all of these different things, you know, it's sort of like there's always a golden rule that if something appears on the front page of a newspaper, right, you know, that this is a really good idea, you should stop that immediately, right? You know, and you see people there'll always be the hype cycles, there'll always be people trying to jump onto the latest thing. And don't get me wrong, if people have been riding the bandwagon for a while, you know, then you can enjoy it. I think there's a difference between, you know, you mentioned like, you know, finance becoming entertainment. I think it's become another game, right, that people have added. So when they finish with Candy Crush on their phone, you know, they can switch over and then, you know, they can see if the market's up or down, you know, on whatever they're owning, you know. So there's been a definite change. You know, one of my favorite analogies is in Japan, you know, you get, there's a huge amount of investment by housewives, right? And they actually get together in little committees and then they all put money in and they invest in certain stocks and stuff as well. And it's a thing. It's a huge market, you know, for them as well. And so every particular area will have its own little games and they'll continue to develop, you know. I mean, you know, I have a young daughter and I had the misfortune probably, you know, to go onto Roblox, right? And I'd never played it before. I went onto it, and within 30 seconds of her playing it, it was like, I need money. I was like, pardon? What do you mean? Oh, I need to buy a hair set for my character. What? You know, and so what you're having is actually a reverse as this as well. You have these games now that are so heavily incentivized for people to spend. You know, it mentions in-app purchases, but I was absolutely shocked. I was like, people can lose, you don't want to have your, your credit card anywhere near any of this stuff. Especially for the younger generations, they get so used to these types of games. And when you have virtual currencies, which is another, part of the digital asset thing, is, these become less innocuous to that money that you have in your pocket or that credit card that you have in your pocket. It becomes something that you don't really see as cash. Or you don't see as money, and that becomes a little bit more dangerous because then people can then start spending and overspend as well.
Yeah, and compared to the technology in the UK and the US, obviously you were there for quite some time. I suppose what exists? What are the differences?
Yeah, so the key difference within the US, right? When I moved there in 2019, I got 7 checkbooks, 7, right? And I kid you not, and this is with a big bank, and I was like, I haven't used a check in so long, I've forgotten even how to do it, right? And in the first year I was there, they had this huge, kind of promotion of what they called instantaneous payments, right? And I was like, this has been around in the UK for quite a while, at least 7 years. So the infrastructure, like you have to understand that like the US is scale, right? And the infrastructure that they have is, is built for scale. And, with the Fed and the SEC and CTFC, all of the different regulators you have, is very difficult to update, right, on such a level. So what you have, though, is that opportunity, though, where if you do create that, and that's why you're seeing now with stablecoins, especially in the US, you can create this sea change over a huge amount of people, right, and at a massive scale. So the technology and the infrastructure is outdated, but the development, the company, the funding that you have, and the innovation out there is accelerating, with those companies. What you have in the UK, Europe, and especially in the UAE, which is just incredible hotbed of innovation as well, is you have a lot more regulatory clarity on new innovation. So whether it's MICA, whether it's the EU AI Act, whether have some of the UK initiatives as well, very pro-tech, very willing to go ahead with that. So you've got a lot more innovation happening that gets kind of spread, but once you need to have both kind of aligned to really kind of have those global rails. And I think now what we're seeing again with things like stable coins and with a lot of this technology coming back is when you have the US aligned with that innovation and funding, and you have the European markets again aligning with the technology stack as well, you then have this huge amount of innovation that's going to happen in a very short space of time.
Yeah. Are there any particular markets where the US is further ahead than the UK? I'm just thinking cloud service. So
Yeah.
AWS had a bit of a shutdown recently.
Yeah.
And there's obviously Microsoft, Oracle, Google. It's all in the US. We
Yeah.
don't really have that here. I don't think it's much of an issue.
Yeah.
It doesn't really make a difference. But what other areas are they accelerating in?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of it's a tough question because Silicon Valley is the epicenter for for overall development with the big tech, right? So most of the vendors that you'll see, even whether it's the UK or Europe, will have either Google, either Amazon, or either Microsoft or multi-cloud providers providing their tech. So that like I was at a Google event last year, and like the stack that they have, the integration that they have is huge, right? And so when you see the ability that you have, they have a huge amount more innovation culture, I would argue. There's much more specialized fintechs out there, for kind of every possible use case you could think of. There's a great company doing legal, specializing for lawyers, right, for AI. So integrating LLMs with law documents, redesigning the whole process for how lawyers work. Huge amount in HR development as well. How do you use AI for the HR business? And then you also have the large consultancies out there as well, which again are putting those products into practice, right? So I'd say that the culture and the innovation is ahead out there as well. And you have things like these meetups, right? There's one thing I didn't realize in New York, there's a meetup for everything, right? So whether you are a single cat owner, there's a meetup for it. Whether it's Crypto Mondays, there's a meetup for it, right? So everything that you have is kind of there, but at that kind of federal level, there's a bit of catching up to do. And over the last year, it has accelerated a lot, but it's still, I would say, behind Europe. And Europe, again, is, I think, has that ability for the tech. It has the talent, it has those hotbeds of innovation. But again, there's a bit of what I'm seeing is kind of fragmentation that you have here to kind of, with all of the different rules, and the standards, it's been very, very slow to react, and MiCA was great 2023 when it first came in, and there's different standards that are coming in, but the pace of change seems to be a lot slower in Europe versus the US.
Yeah. What other major cultural differences occur between the UK and the US?
So there's a lot more kind of I'd say raw innovation in the US. So which is we're going to launch this and keep our fingers crossed, right? And get things out there. A lot of the European, kind of attitude is, yes, we will check it, we will double check it again, and then we'll triple check it, and then we'll do some other, other checks before we go out there. So there is that, I think, speed of delivery in terms of that cultural, kind of launching products. There's the kind of the classic Steve Jobs, where it's just like, it's like pure innovation, launch it, reiterate, launch it, reiterate. I think that culture is really prevalent out there. Europe, it is here, but again, it's a bit more conservative, which means that it's a lot slower to deliver and a lot slower to get into production.
Yeah, I think it's really strange, honestly. Well, we have such incredible education here.
Absolutely.
Incredible engineers, incredible brains, but why do we still play such a small role when it comes to the tech industry?
So I think at the end of the day, it's sort of like, where do you sit in the world stage, right? I mean, take your phone, for example, right? Look at those applications and name all the European applications that are on there, right?
I don't think I could.
Right. Okay. You understand, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
why isn't there an equivalent of Google in Europe? Why isn't there an equivalent of, of Amazon in Europe? So what you have is, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, because, the technology does exist. As you said, the talent certainly exists, the education exists, but that underlying infrastructure that people rely on day by day, you've got great stories, where you have innovation, like Revolut, you have all these companies that are coming out there, but those types of unicorns are in the minority. In the States, you have a very established infrastructure with big tech, which, has such a dominant market share, it's kind of almost impossible to go along, and to at least compete with it from a European perspective.
Yeah, I do actually have HSBC on my phone. I'll get told off.
There you
if
go.
I don't.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was at a roundtable earlier this month in Newcastle on the home soil, and we were talking about the UK and Europe's chip making ability, AI infrastructure ability. And we've seen that NVIDIA, BlackRock, Intel are investing in the UK.
Yeah.
So they all seemed really concerned about it and suggested that we should have our own UK organization, or even the government investing in it as well. But do you think that actually makes a difference whether we build it ourselves or just buy it from the US?
So, I mean, if you look at the China issue, right, you have certain sovereign issues where, there's a restriction in terms of there is definitely demand for the product, and the ability to build it yourself would take a number of years, right? So the question is that this technology moves so fast, and especially in the AI world, it's phenomenal. Every week there's something new coming out. So the question is like, if you're going to try and create that, or even think about creating that, bringing in the investment, bringing in that talent, setting that up from scratch, by the time that you could practically, create something that would work, it'd have to be at a state-sponsored level, again, which is another, level of, of delays. You want to be able to access that technology as fast as possible. A lot of the time is that you want to solve the problem, you want to get stuff into production, and you want to be able to be up and running, which is going to be using whatever tools is available at the time. Now we know NVIDIA dominates the market. You saw the news that the US took a stake in Intel, as well. So they've seen where you have strategically important organizations where it's worth investing in, but that has to come from the state level. If it doesn't, you're going to struggle.
Yeah. Why did the UK invest so little when it comes to tech?
I think I think it's priorities. At the end of the day, is that you have to have someone at that level where you're going to be, prioritizing the technology. And a lot of the stances in technology fall into kind of three camps, right? The first one is first through the doors, right? Lead through. Most people, there's an old analogy that the first people through the doors usually get shot, right? So that's the first set. The second one is fast follower, right? So that's the ones where you see through the door. And you see a lot of that in the kind of the US and the UAE, right? So you see the technology, it's established technology, but you want to get on board pretty early stage, right? And then the third one is really kind of wait, see what happens, right? And it's conservative, it's safe a lot of the time, it provides, but it doesn't, it's not that spark of innovation that people have. And I think we've seen that third aspect in the UK and Europe as well, I think, as well. Over the last couple of years where, bringing in, understanding the technology first, bringing in that regulatory framework for that technology, and then giving that latitude and the funding for those VC companies to come in, use that regulation to be able to then start, creating new jobs and creating new growth.
Yeah. So what can we do as a nation to encourage tech innovation?
Education. It has to start with education first. Every organization, there's absolutely no excuse for any organization today to not be conversant in AI, right? There was a great article very recently saying that kids in China are getting trained in AI, youngest 6 years old, right? Okay, right. So the end of the day, why isn't our workforce, at a national level, even in schools as well, trained in that technology? It's not going away. We're pretty clear around that as well. What are those tools as well? But teaching them those skills, and within organizations becoming conversant within AI and understanding it. So if you had that, understanding at that fundamental level across governments, you have that ability to create the growth, that when you have ministers for enterprise, they're fundamentally wanting to fund, but the message is understood because the capabilities are understood, and it's a very opaque market. So even when we were talking about discussing what is definition of digital assets, what is the definition of generative AI? There's all this analogies and terms. They're not difficult once people understand it and use the technology. When you first come across it, people don't understand it and they fear whatever they don't want, which means the answer is no, and that stops growth, stops a lot of, innovation where it should be responsible innovation at the end of the day, and, it should be protecting the people, as well. Fundamentally, things like GDPR are fantastic because they really kind of make sure guardrails are in place as we build this new technology. But at the same time, fundamental education, every child, you should be able to actually know and use the technology.
Yeah, it links back to the earlier point about the AI innovation team and setting that initial AI strategy.
Yeah.
Education, AI literacy is definitely key. If you were going into a new organization, how would you set the principles, set the foundation for AI literacy?
Yeah, so first of all, the whole program has to come from the top, right? So you need to make sure that you have to have that senior stakeholder approval that's going to be coming down and have that messaging, and it has to come down from those senior areas that this is the future, this is where the business is going to be going, and that has to be such a strong level to start with. The second part is really incorporating it, like a lot of enterprises and institutions have training. They have compliance training that people have to do. A lot of it is very mandatory. A lot of people hate it, but at the end of the day, no one is actually training them on things like prompting, right? Basic tools, how to understand what they are. And also make sure as well that it's something that's not illegal, right? There's so many organizations that have come across where, and it's very conservative. It's the right approach to start with, is to, a new technology comes along, you have carpet-wide bans in the organization, so people don't misuse the technology, which is completely fair. The second part, though, is to understand and explore, again, education, to understand how it can be used, and then let people allow them to use those tools, and when you put those, like if you have, all of your analysts, and you said what program would you have? You have training on data scientists, you'd have training on prompting, you have training on AI, and you give them the tools, most importantly, to be able to use that. So you can train people, right? And you can make them sit through hours of PowerPoint slides, but then you need to get it onto their desks, because only until it's actually in front of their worktop and they get to use it will the actual penny start to drop, and they'll be able to actually realize, now I understand it.
Yeah, I know in terms of education, I'm biased because I studied there, but Loughborough University are actually educating and teaching the computer science students on prompt engineering.
Yep.
And they are leveraging some of the cursor AIs of the world already. So there is a shift there. I think some universities realize that is the future, but they're blessed to have people from industry working in the university. So they see both sides of it. In terms of younger students, I suppose before or pre-university,
yeah,
is there anything they could be doing to learn about generative AI?
Yeah, I think one of the fantastic things that came out a while ago was where, people can build their own applications, right? You can have, what we have now is things like using AI, low code, no code, right? So literally things like drag and drop to build applications. They used to have this Ruby on Rails where people could build their own robots, which is fantastic. And even being able to, depending on the age of the child, the sophistication that they can have is phenomenal if they give them those tools. So one of the brilliant things I saw is they start things like robot wars, where they build their own robot and they go into battle with each other. It's such a great project where people can actually start building AI tools, into these things where you'll have a really fun project, that they actually want to do, and encourage them where it's not like, pointing a gun at their head to learn, but it's actually something they can explore themselves, and again, starting with applications, simple applications to make games, for example. How cool would it be to make your own game with AI?
Yeah, it sounds pretty cool. There must be a few apps out there that do it on a massive scale now.
Yeah, and right now, you can build websites. There's a number of different website generators where you describe what you want. There's even applications now which will take an existing website, and then AI will actually look at the code of the website and then create your own version of that website, right?
Smart.
So yeah, so again, I think there is a lot out there. People need to also look a little bit more beyond ChatGPT, and look at Hugging Face is a fantastic example, right? I've lost count of the number of models. I checked a while, it was like 125,000. I'm sure there's so many more right now as well. But there's models for everything, and people don't realize the types of things that they could have. So translation into Turkish, for example, there's a model for that, right? Certain types of document recognition of ancient text, there's a model for that, So there is a lot of people need to understand that these things are out there, discover them, and also use them.
Yeah. Well, we've touched on the positives of AI there, which is good.
Yes.
Is there anything else that you're optimistic about when it comes to AI in this new wave?
Yeah, people keep talking about, going to this kind of large level of intelligence, in terms of AI. And for me, I've seen the progression from ChatGPT 3, right the way through to 5, where we are now, and I'm sure 6 will be launched soon as well. So where you have it, the use cases that you could have, people start using or bringing AI into your daily life, right? And, you know, there's so many different things where if you're, like, say, for example, you're redecorating a house, right? You can take a picture of a wall, all right? You can take that particular area. You can put in the URLs for 4 or 5 different paint companies, whether it's Crown, Green, and, any of the Farrow and Ball ones, as well, and ask it to generate the pictures for each of those different areas with the paint, right? That is, if you're a painter and decorator, right, out there, you've suddenly got AI tool that's almost free, right? You can pay a subscription for it, but that's going to complement your job, right? So I'm, super kind of excited about where this can go. They're going to get faster. They're going to get, like carrying it. There's some of the Johnny Eve stuff that's going to be coming out, or it's just like trying to change things. Moving away, I think when people start talking about using voice interaction, as well, that you might not even be using your phone anytime soon. So I think the evolution is going to be very fast around this. And I think that, we're going to get to this level where the LLMs are commodity models, at some point. And, for us, it's going to be how we actually use that, and yeah, there's this brilliant example. I forgot to. I'll send this to you as well. You can put it on. So in China, you have climbers can go out and rent an AI exoskeleton. Okay, so what you do is you put it on your legs, and it looks like if you remember the movie with Matt Damon, you have it where he has like a little exoskeleton on him. You attach it to your legs. And basically, the AI measures your body movements and then adjusts and then provides you power and extra support while you're hiking. So now you have all of these, like literally you go along, you can help like 80-year-old grannies with exoskeletons on them hiking up a mountain, powered by AI. So, awesome. There's just some awesome stuff coming, and I think this is just the start.
Yeah. So what do humans still do better than the machines?
So there's a lot of reasoning that people can actually have. So humans do humans better. So when we have a conversation face to face, we have that ability to react to emotions, read people's faces, whether it's subconsciously, understand people's body movements, and react to that. So there is still a lot of level of development. And again, this is actually there's a research paper on this as well. This is the next level of kind of the kind of progression of AI technology, but we do humans very well, all right? So everyone's been in a call center and they've had, please speak to a human, please speak to a human. I need someone. So there's a lot of that customer support area. The line is becoming very, very narrow, between the two, where it actually, people don't realize they're having a conversation. But where you have that face-to-face interaction, humans are always going to be there, and I think at this point, and again, that you said right now, right? That ability to read human emotions, to react, and to understand things at that kind of almost subconscious level, humans still are far superior. Now, will that change? Absolutely, but again, it's another level of the development. And the second part is where, you're going to start seeing, decisions made that machines make that humans don't, right? When we make a decision, we might be factoring a lot of different things. People talk about the 10,000 hour rule, so if you have an antiques dealer looking at a piece of, of pottery, they can tell immediately that that's a fake, right? Now, can you train a particular, model to that? Possibly, right, as well. But where you have these crafts, that have been built over generations, especially in Japan, where you have these, generational families making products, over time, that's still going to be very, very hard to replicate, but again, they're getting closer.
Getting closer. Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that about the human on the chatbot. I spoke to a chief data officer of a FTSE 100 organization and the retail firm, and he said the most commonly used word on their new chatbot, LLM on the website, was human.
Yeah.
The first thing they say.
Yeah.
So I don't think the AI is as sophisticated as it ought to be yet, but it's moving in the right direction. It's promising.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite phrase that I got from a CTO once was confidently wrong,
Yeah.
right? And again, we've all been there, right? I've had, a number of different interactions where, I've been prompting and various certain results and believing the prompts that come out, and they're just complete nonsense, right? And it's like a wild goose chase, and you don't get apology, right? At the end of it, saying, "Sorry, I've just wasted the last 2 hours of your time." You at some point you realize it's sort of like it's speaking to someone who has got no idea what they're talking about, and you've talked about something for the last hour, and you've realized that this person has absolutely no clue, So again, that the hallucination that gap has been narrowed a huge amount. We've seen that by the number of parameters that these models have now, right? It's insane, but there is still work to be done.
Yeah, definitely. So before we wrap up, I know you were at London Blockchain Conference.
Yeah.
Were there any extra insights you'd like to share that surprised you? Anything about the way the future of AI and blockchain and crypto is developing?
Yeah, I mean, look, for me, I was very excited by the convergence of AI and the digital asset and blockchain technology. I thought that was something I'd never seen before. There've been essentially different camps, and this is not competing, but at the same time, separate technologies. And with the hype cycle, you had a huge amount of blockchain, from, probably, 16 onwards, to 22, and then it kind of petered off with a lot of the scandals in the market. And then the AI hype has just been relentless over the last couple of years, and it's just gained momentum. So for me, the convergence of the two technologies was the first thing. The second thing I thought was capital markets, right? Seeing those, guys, there was one guy from TRM Labs came in and said, I have to wear pinstripe suits now, right? Because there's so many bankers here, So you're seeing a convergence of a lot more corporate interaction, so rather just following, whether it's not just technology enthusiasts, you actually have that enterprise adoption of the technology. And then you have also those huge amount of services. So, you have the audit services, KYC services, and the discussions that you have now, it's not just blockchain and AI, it's blockchain and AI. How does that work for organizations? So for me, very positive about the future, around it. I think the Genius Act and the MICA, both kind of working together now, as well, is going to add a huge amount of momentum. And also from as I said, from Swift and BlackRock's announcement as well, from a market perspective, when you start having this tokenization at so many different levels where people's mutual funds, money market funds become tokenized, it becomes part of your everyday investments. People's lives, pensions become, part of this digital journey.
Awesome. Well, Andy, thank you very much for the
No,
insights.
absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.